to fund parts of the government, and it's affecting the paychecks of over 800,000 federal workers. We'll talk to representatives from both sides of the aisle in Congress to see if they and the White House are any closer to a deal.
Plus, another Democrat tossing his hat into the ring for president, what Julian Castro says makes him a different candidate.
And we're learning brand new details about the harrowing weeks in captivity for a Wisconsin girl now reunited with her family. Welcome to America's News Headquarters from Washington. I'm Kristen Fisher, and Leland, you're going to miss all the snow here.
All the snow and everybody at home. So many government employees at home there, Kristen, in Washington. The shutdown obviously having a real effect in D.C. So much of the immigration debate, the border wall debate is here in California and affects folks here. I'm Leland Vittert in Los Angeles. Kristen, back to Washington in a minute. Right now up Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House, where President Trump is urging Democrats to return to D.C. to negotiate a deal to end the partial government shutdown. He's also taking on a New York Times report published late Friday that claims the FBI took serious steps to investigate the president back in May of last year. Ellison Barber live on the north lawn of the White House ahead of the promised snow. Hi, Ellison.
Hey, Lynn. Yeah, so the FBI reportedly started investigating days after President Trump fired FBI Director James Comey. They were reportedly looking at him not only because they were concerned about obstruction of justice, but also to see if the president was working with Russia. The New York Times says, quote, law enforcement officials became so concerned by the president's behavior that they began investigating whether he had been working on behalf of Russia against American interest, and that counterintelligence investigators had to consider whether the president's own actions constituted a possible threat to national security. Agents also sought to determine whether Mr. Trump was knowingly working for Russia or had unwittingly fallen under Moscow's influence. President Trump, responding to that report, tweeting in part, just learned in the failing New York Times that the corrupt former leaders of the FBI opened up an investigation on me for no reason and with no proof after I fired Lion James Comey. Comey and former FBI lawyer Lisa Page previously told House investigators that by the time Mr. Comey was fired and the special counsel was appointed in May of 2017, there was no hard evidence of collusion. The report in the Times suggests an FBI counterintelligence case was opened around that time. All of this, of course, as the government remains shut down.
We're in the same position we were before. 10 days before Christmas, we put forth a plan, outlined everything we wanted. Democrats never responded to that. We then had our negotiating team led by Vice President Mike Pence meet with some leaders on the Hill. They talked about a few items. We put together a budget proposal. We'll release that to the press as well. Democrats won't come to the table and negotiate off that either.
That's White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley there. Democrats, of course, say that they support smart, effective border security solutions, new technology, more personnel, and better port of entry infrastructure. But they say they do not support a wall at the U.S.-Mexico border, a wall which they have called wasteful, ineffective, and refer to as something that Mexico was supposed to pay for. Leland?
Ellison Barber at the White House. We head down Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol for the other part of the story. Kristen?
Yeah, so as we've been saying, as of today, this partial government shutdown is now the longest closure in U.S. history as it enters its 22nd day. And with no solution in sight, the effects of the shutdown are now really hitting home for the roughly 800,000 federal employees who missed their first paychecks just yesterday. So our David Spunt joins us live with the latest. And David, I mean, this really has to be ramping up the pressure on both sides now exponentially.
Kristen, it really is a lot of pressure on both sides. We hit that longest shutdown mark at midnight. It has been a grueling few weeks for many of those federal employees, many people just across the United States as well. And while there appears to be no end in immediate sight, the president just tweeted in the past couple of hours, he said, quote, Democrats should come back to Washington and work to end the shutdown, while at the same time ending the horrible humanitarian crisis at our southern border. I am in the White House waiting for you. Now, some key things have happened, Kristen, over the past 24 hours. Yesterday, by a vote of 411 to 7, The House passed a bill to approve back pay for federal workers. Those same federal workers that missed their first paycheck yesterday. You mentioned it's about 800,000. They're going to receive that back pay as we continue this government shutdown stalemate. Now, California House Democrat John Garamendi was on with Neil Cavuto in just the last hour. Take a listen.
We really need to reopen government. This has become a very, very serious national problem, not just for the workers, the 800,000, but also for people that rely upon governmental services.
The Senate passed the measure on Thursday. That same measure now goes to President Trump, who indicated he will sign it for that back pay. Now, the fight over the border wall continues with no real progress, at least in the public view. President Trump said in the cabinet room yesterday, he's leaning against declaring a national emergency to build the wall, but there is a caveat.
It's the easy way out, but Congress should do this. This is too simple. It's too basic. And Congress should do this. If they can't do it, if at some point they just can't do it, this is a 15-minute meeting. If they can't do it, I will declare a national emergency.
2016 presidential candidate Secretary Hillary Clinton also weighed in on Twitter over the last few hours. She said, quote, as of today, this shutdown is the longest in history. The costs are already high. People are missing paychecks, losing business, or working without pay. Our national parks are overrun with trash. The FDA and FBI warn of the harm to our food safety and national security. Now, instead of working through the weekend, many Republicans and Democrats, not all of them in Congress, left, and they will not be back to work until Monday. Kristen?
At least one Democratic congresswoman stayed in Washington.
Yep.
We're going to be talking to her in just a few minutes. David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Leland.
All right. There is also a couple of Republicans left in D.C., one of them Florida Congressman Francis Rooney. Nice to see you, sir. At some level, now that Republicans are in the minority, how much leverage, pull, say, does your caucus have?
Well, I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. But in the first week, I don't think we've had a lot of leverage at all.
How does that play out? Nancy Pelosi going to be able to sort of wield that gavel over President Trump?
Well, you know, I feel sorry for the president right now. He has. They said we don't want a concrete wall. We want a metal wall. He said, okay, we'll do a metal wall with slats. Then they said we want technology and we want more border agents. He said, okay, we'll add that to the package. But it's just really hard to reach an equitable solution among two parties when everybody doesn't want to try to find one.
Fair to say this is more valuable for each side as a political weapon heading into 2020 than it is as a solved bipartisan compromise?
Absolutely. I think history shows that in 2013, all these Democrats voted for an immigration reform package that included a lot more money for wall, as well as technology, as well as immigration reform. Now they don't even want to talk about any of that.
At the same level, though, during the 2018 midterms, as the last couple of weeks wound down and the president went so hard on immigration, Republicans lost 40-plus seats. Do you worry that if the Democrats are able to hold this over Republicans' head in 2020, it'll have the same deleterious effect for your party, sir?
Well, I think I saw some figures, maybe from Fox, that over 70% of Americans are really concerned about border security, and about half of Americans absolutely want to invest in a wall.
All right, so you still a winning issue in terms of how you're looking at it for continuing to demand funding for a wall, border security, call it what you will. These are the sound bites that are going to start coming on the other side. Friday was the first missed federal worker paycheck pay period, and we have this sound bite from a worker. Take a listen.
I have a mortgage. I have 2 children. My wife is also a federal worker. Any bill that any person would pay, medical bills, paying for food, it's all coming out of savings right now. So that's really difficult.
You worry about the effect of so many more sound bites like that and tragic sob stories of federal workers without paychecks, putting a lot more pressure on the Republican caucus?
I don't know about the pressure on the Republican caucus, because so many Americans want to secure the border, and this is a field that's been walked through so many times, and so many votes have been cast to do these very same things. I lament greatly the suffering that our federal workers are going through and their families, and I hope we can find an answer to this, but it's going to require people wanting to seek a compromise solution.
So fair to say that you are steadfast and remain so, that the suffering of the federal workers and the political price of that should go on for as long as it needs to until there is funding for a wall, a fence, call it what you want.
Well, it's just a couple of things are inescapable. First of all, Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala are not going to become good enough countries in the near term, no matter how much they are trying to stem the tide of refugees trying to leave and come to the United States. Second, you're not a country under international law if you can't police, protect your border, and determine who you let in and out of your country.
Well, fair points on both. Last point to you. You think about where this heads in the Senate, and Republicans in the Senate, obviously, since they're in the majority, have a lot more control than you in the House do. Cory Gardner, Collins, and McSally, 3 senators up in 2020 from purple states. Do you worry about them going soft on this and making it a lot harder for House Republicans to hold the line?
Well, I've just got to pay attention to one car on the road, and that's me. I don't really worry about the Senate too much. We've had our issues with the Senate for the last 2 years.
All right, fair enough. Congressman, appreciate you being here. You're in Washington. If you get a call to come back to work and negotiate on this thing, let us know, all right?
I'll do that. Have a nice time out in L.A.
Enjoy your weekend, sir. Kristen?
Well, joining us now from the other side of the political aisle, California Congresswoman Katie Hill. Congresswoman, thanks for coming on, and welcome to Washington.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Quite a welcome.
It is. It's an interesting time to start.
You are saying something that not a lot of other people in your party are saying. You were saying that you would support some funding for some kind of physical barrier at the border. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 main points to consider. The first is that we can't talk about any of this until the government's open. My district has a huge number of federal employees. We have the Palmdale Regional Air Traffic Control Center, which controls all flights into Southern California, so you can imagine how busy that is. We have a federal prison that literally houses former terrorists, that prison guards are working without pay. They're essential personnel. We have so many federal employees, many of whom are law enforcement, that are still on the job, and they're law enforcement professionals. And so, to have this conversation about what border security should look like it has to open the government first.
So when you say you support some kind of physical barrier, what specifically are you talking about? Are you willing to put a dollar amount or any kind of just kind of hard data in terms of what you would support physically at the border?
Well, I think that's the challenge, right, is that we have to air this out in an open process. We need to hear from the experts on both sides. We have to hear from the sheriffs, for example, that work at the border. We have to hear from Border Patrol. We have to hear from, mayors from the towns that are actually right there on the border as to what they feel is needed. We know that there's already fencing and other physical barriers across the border in many different places, but there are gaps, and we need to find ways of filling those gaps, repairing the fencing. I think that for many of us, there's not really doubt that some kind of physical barrier is necessary. I think the challenge is that we've gotten so hung up on these semantics, really on both sides, and gosh, I can't tell you how much I've come to hate the word wall. And I think many of us have, because it's unnecessary, right? Like in the campaign, President Trump was fixated on this wall, and I think we on the Democratic side of the aisle have such a gut reaction to it because it's associated with this sort of hateful rhetoric. But in reality, we need to step back, all of us, step back and say, okay, concrete wall 2,000 miles long, never going to happen. Bad idea. President has walked that back. Most Republicans have walked that back. But Democrats are for border security too, and we know that part of that does include physical barriers.
Do you wish that other Democrats would come forward and say, I would at least support some part of funding for some kind of barrier at the border? I mean, Speaker Pelosi has just said flat out, no, nothing, no dollars.
I think what she said is that we're not going to give any dollars to the wall. So again, this is a semantics issue more than anything else. And so what I'd like to see is all of us, again, taking a step back. We do need to really lay the groundwork, and I'm hoping that President Trump will come to the table on this, is that let's stop using federal workers' lives as a political pawn in this, and let's say, all right, we're going to open the government. Democrats want a lot too on this immigration debate. Regardless of the border security piece, we have this DACA issue that remains unresolved. We have these TPS recipients that are desperate. We have, we have real issues around immigration that we've been trying forever, and we have things we want to negotiate on. So let's open it. then let's go to the table.
Do you agree with how your fellow California Congresswoman, Speaker Pelosi, do you agree with how she's been handling these negotiations?
I think she's in a very tough position. We are a huge tent conference, right? The Democratic caucus is massive, and our ideology runs the entire spectrum. So she's in a position where you have to represent that entire spectrum. And, you know, remember, we're coming off of an election where the Republican side closed their argument with immigration with this fear around the caravan, and it didn't work. So I think we're in a place where the people who elected us are saying, don't give in on this. This is, you know, this isn't what we elected you for. And so there's a place where we have to draw the line. But I think that again, that line that we're all consistent on as Democrats is that open the government first, then we'll talk. You will not get everyone happy on either side of the aisle with whatever solution we end up landing on.
You have described what President Trump is doing, his strategy here, as political terrorism. That's a very strong word. Do you stand by that?
I do, because the definition of terrorism is using fear and striking fear in the hearts of people to get a political end. And that's what's happening, right? Fear of missing a paycheck, which has now happened, fear of not being able to pay your bills, fear of, you know, missing critical services, fear of whether we're going to have plane crashes because we're missing on critical aviation personnel, fear on the southern border patrol agents aren't being paid. So I think that use of leverage is in a way inciting terror.
Well, and President Trump kind of counters that by saying, you know, he believes that Democrats are the ones holding these furloughed federal employees hostage. So there's plenty of blame to go around and pointing of fingers, but now this is the longest shutdown in history. So endgame, how do you see this ending really quickly?
Endgame, I would say that to my Republican colleagues and, you know, even to Mr. Trump, we're here, many of us are here, and we're ready to talk, but it's not, the first step is open this government, help the people who are struggling. You know, again, my district, I have a single mom, a veteran, an air traffic controller who is struggling. Open it, then let's talk.
All right, I got to leave it there, Congresswoman, but thank you for being one of the few congressmen and women and senators to actually stay in D.C. this weekend during the shutdown. Appreciate it. And be sure to catch Fox News Sunday tomorrow. Chris Wallace has an exclusive interview with Senator Lindsey Graham. Check your local local listings for time and channel, and plus we've got Howie Kurtz and his guests. They'll take a look at the coverage of this partial government shutdown. That's tomorrow at 11 Eastern. Leland.
Lindsey Graham with All right, both the wall and the funding debate promise to be major issues in the 2020 race. And almost every day, a new Democrat adds their name to the list of candidates. Today, no exception. Live pictures from San Antonio right now, where Julian Castro will take the stage to try out his stump speech. We'll check back in there as things get underway. Meantime, our Garrett Tenney joins us now with the ever-growing list. Hi, Garrett.
Leland, good afternoon to you. This Democrat field is expected to be a busy one. More than 24 are considering a run for president, as many as 40 by some counts. And the field of candidates, officially declared candidates, is expected to grow over the next few weeks. Last night, Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard kicked things off by officially throwing her hat in the ring.
Are you going to run for president of the United States and do something about it? Do you think you should? Do you think you should? Are you going to run?
I have decided to run and will be making a formal announcement within the next week.
The 37-year-old was a major in the Hawaii Army National Guard, serving 2 tours in the Middle East. And while Gabbard doesn't have the same name recognition as other potential candidates, she is viewed as a bit of a maverick within her own party and someone willing to work with the other side. She was one of the few lawmakers in Washington to back Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton in 2016. She resigned from the DNC to do that, and she was criticized for meeting with President-elect Trump to discuss the war in Syria. Now, Gabbard plans to campaign on issues such as health care, immigration reform, and the environment, but said in a statement, quote, "The main reason I'm running has to do with an issue that is central to the rest, war and peace." Well, today, Senator Elizabeth Warren is in the key early voting state of New Hampshire after forming an exploratory committee. Former Obama Housing Secretary Julian Castro will be there next week as well. He's expected to officially kick off his campaign later this hour. This is just the beginning, though. A number of other big names are expected to decide on a run in the coming weeks, including former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Bernie Sanders, and, of course, Beto O'Rourke. Leland?
Yeah, Biden reportedly telling friends that if I am walking, I'm running. So we'll wait to hear from him. Garrett Tenney in D.C. Garrett, thanks. Kristen?
Coming up, a deadly explosion at a bakery in the center of Paris. We'll tell you what authorities believe caused the blast. Plus, millions of Americans dealing with severe winter weather today. We'll get the latest forecast as snow heads east. And the battle over the border wall. We'll talk to a dreamer about his fate as a possible pawn in negotiations between the White House and Democrats. This as both sides refuse to budge.
He knows, the people in the room know that that was not what happened. But he said, in 30 days, will you support a wall? And I said no.
"13-year-old Jamie Closs has been found safe and reunited with her family nearly 3 months after she was abducted and her parents were murdered in their own home." We're learning more about the suspect in this. Matt Finn, Gordon, Wisconsin, a very small town near Lake Superior, far north Wisconsin. Hi, Matt.
Leland, this 13-year-old girl found safe, but still a baffling, horrifying mystery here in rural Wisconsin. We're standing in the neighborhood where Jamie Closs was found. Right down this street is the home where police say the suspect, 21-year-old Jake Patterson, lives. Police still have it barricaded right now. This is likely where Jamie was held captive for some, if not all, of the 3 months. This 13-year-old girl decided to make a run for it when her captor was not home. And then Jamie Closs stumbled upon a woman walking her dog in this neighborhood. Jamie told that woman who she was, and they both rushed into a neighbor's house for safety.
She told me who she was. And then that's when I said, this child needs to be someplace safe, and you need to get her there now. And you need the police now. So that's my mission, and that's what we did.
Once Jamie was inside her neighbor's house, she identified who her captor was and what his car looked like, and police say in a matter of minutes they tracked down Patterson and arrested him as he was driving around trying to get Jamie back. The entire region and country rejoicing this morning. Even Elizabeth Smart, who you may recall also was held captive and escaped, posted on her Instagram, quote, "No matter what may unfold in her story, let's all try to remember that this young woman has survived. And whatever other details may surface, the most important will still remain that she is alive. May God bless you, Jamie Closs, and may we all continue to search for every missing child." And the suspect has been charged with, or faces 2 counts of first-degree homicide and 1 count of kidnapping, and he's scheduled to make his first appearance in court on Monday. Leland.
Matt Finn, northern Wisconsin, obviously a town trying to get a lot more answers in this case. Matt, thank you. Kristen?
All right, you're looking at a live event in San Antonio, Texas, where Julian Castro, the former San Antonio mayor, is expected to announce his 2020 plans. Our Casey Stiegel is live with the latest. Casey?
And Kristen, we are moments away from Julian Castro taking the stage here as hundreds of his supporters are gathered to hear this big announcement. We'll take you there live next.
Every veteran,
To make Castro just the latest Democrat to join an increasingly crowded field, one that's literally growing by the day. Our Casey Stiegel is on the ground in San Antonio with the very latest. Hi, Casey.
Hey, Chris, good to see you. I'm going to kind of keep my voice down because the speakers are talking right now. In fact, Julian's twin brother, U.S. Congressman Joaquin Castro, is on the stage right now behind me speaking, and he is going to be talking to, introducing his mother, and then Julian will be taking the stage himself. Up until now, at this very point, his campaign has been in the exploratory committee stage, but we are also expecting Castro to make his formal announcement that he will be running for 2020 president. Now, San Antonio is, of course, the backdrop for today's event because this is a city that is near and dear to the Castro family. Julian Castro grew up in this area, baptized in a church just around the corner from here. And of course, he was the mayor of the city from 2009 to 2014 until he was sworn in as President Obama's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, youngest member of Obama's cabinet. by the way, at the time. And now at age 44, he would also be the youngest presidential candidate and the only Latino in the 2020 field. Last week, he was campaigning at smaller events in Iowa and in Nevada. Next week, it'll be off to New Hampshire. He is in favor of universal health care, comprehensive immigration reform, and the Paris Climate Accord. In fact, that's gotten a big reaction from the crowd here today. A stark difference from President Trump, but analysts say, aside from the issues, the Democratic candidate must also be a strong communicator to effectively battle President Trump in this field. Castro, of course, has big name recognition here in San Antonio and across the state of Texas, but now it's time to see if that name recognition translates out to the rest of the country. So again, we are just about to hear from Julian, and he's expected to take the stage really at any moment. We've got it covered here from San Antonio. Kristen?
Casey, thank you so much. And gosh, it really is such a busy weekend for 2020. You've got Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard announcing last night that she was going to be entering the race, and Washington Governor Jay Inslee, he's in Nevada today to kind of test the waters. So maybe the beginning of 2019, but it certainly feels like we're getting into the thick of 2020 already. Casey, thank you. Leland?
We are.
All right, and back to San Antonio when Julian Castro takes the stage. Meantime, we bring in Michael Knowles of Daily Wire fame to talk about this. Michael, good to see you. We'll put up the graphic, and it's a little bit difficult to see the faces of every possible Democrat. We've had to make them so small because there are so many possible candidates. I think that's more than what is allowed on a traveling Major League Baseball team, but I could be wrong by a couple of numbers here. It brings up an important point. You got so many possibilities. Do the Democrats have anybody, number one? Number two, is this a little bit of a plus? Because for commentators like you, it's a plus for Democrats because it's difficult to figure out who commentators like you focus on.
Who to go after? Well, Leland, I have a big announcement to make on your show today. I ate scrambled eggs for breakfast this morning. I am confident this is as consequential for American politics as Julian Castro's announcement. There was a poll that came out.
Did they have cheese in them? Maybe a little bit of bacon?
Well, I'm going to wait until my formal announcement to discuss that. There was a poll that came out in November. It showed that the leading Democrat candidate for president is none of the above. And after him is Biden and Beto and all of these guys.
Fair to say, those typically are a name ID poll this early. The counter to your argument is that you could have said the exact same words about Donald Trump's announcement when he came down the gold elevator. In fact, a lot of commentators did say, this is a joke, this is a publicity stunt, now he's president of the United States.
That's certainly true. Of course, President Trump had ubiquitous name ID, and he was a major cultural figure. It seems to me that a generic Democrat likely could defeat President Trump in 2020. The trouble is there's no such thing as a generic Democrat, and all of these candidates are terribly flawed candidates right now. I suppose Beto is coming out the gate fairly strong because he has the Oprah endorsement, and I believe in this country Oprah selects the President of the United States, certainly
I don't
in 2008.
think she selected Donald Trump.
Well, that's true, only among the Democrats. And so Beto O'Rourke is a fairly flawed candidate. He lost his bid for the Senate in Texas, obviously.
You know, there was another member of the House of Representatives who lost their bid for Senate and then became president. His name was Abraham Lincoln.
That's true. It's been a while.
It's been a while, but it's happened.
That is certainly true. Joe Biden now seems as though he's in. His brother is saying he will be in the race.
Biden had quipped to a friend that if I'm walking, I'm running. So go. It brings up an important point, though. Republicans love to be a little bit confident in this. They love to sort of joke around on this and go, your scrambled eggs line is a new one, but fitting, perhaps. The question becomes, though, Republicans a little too complacent about this? Is there a inevitability factor that they have to worry about a la Hillary Clinton in 2016?
Absolutely they do. We're in a very tough position electorally. The 2016 election was such a unexpected result for so many Americans. Hillary was a uniquely flawed candidate. So Republicans should take this very seriously, and we should train our sights on the candidates that we really think could come up and take this nomination. The question is right now, could Joe Biden defeat Donald Trump? I don't really see it. Could Beto O'Rourke? Possibly. He's a great campaigner. He's a good retail politician. A candidacy like Tulsi Gabbard actually, to me, is somewhat interesting.
The Daily Beast said Bashar Assad's favorite Democrat announces for 2020 was their headline. But she's been unique in how she's gone after the president. Even for a Democrat, she's been uniquely tough. We'll put what of her tweet we can put up on the screen when she talked about how President Trump being Saudi Arabia's, I won't use this word, is not America first. That resonates in a way with a certain group of Democrats, but it has a little bit of crossover appeal. Rand Paul sort of says the same thing.
Of course, that's true. And you see, even in the language, you see Democrats trying to play Donald Trump. The trouble is that you can't play Donald Trump. There's only one, and he's an American original. It hasn't worked out for other candidates when they've tried. Right now, the Democrats have an intersectionality problem. They have now created this ideology where they are opposed in all ways to the straight white male who thinks that he's male. There's all oppression, there's all patriarchy. According to basically every poll.
Except Beto and Biden, the two people who you brought up, and Bernie, those things.
And Bernie, don't forget him. So now you have the leading Democrat candidates, according to the polls, which do favor name ID, are straight white men who think that they're men. I suppose Beto wore a dress in his 20s. There are photos of that. That might help him out.
And we've also seen him get dental work recently as well. Michael Knowles, great conversation. Back to San Antonio for the announcement. We'll see if it's more significant than your scrambled eggs this morning. Kristen?
Leland, coming up, we have a snowstorm blanketing several parts of the Midwest, causing travel disruptions, school closures as it heads towards the East Coast. And the fight over border security continues as the partial government shutdown enters a fourth week.
Without the barrier, you don't have security. Without the barrier, you have people driving in loaded up with drugs, with smuggled people, with all sorts of things that you don't want to know about.
Castro is expected to announce that he's running for president in 2020. He is walking up to the stage right now. He will be one of the youngest candidates in the Democratic presidential field and likely the only Latino. He's just 44 years old. And you can see him walking up to the microphone right now. And Leland, he was, of course, who can forget, he was on the short list of candidates to be Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. And let's listen in.
Good morning. Y buenos días. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to my mom. I bet there are a lot of y'all that may have come here to see her instead of me. You know, my mom grew up on this west side of San Antonio, and she got involved in politics a long time ago because she wanted to improve her community here on the west side to make sure that folks had basic things like streets and drainage. And so she got active back then in the Young Democrats, and then she ran when she was 23 years old with this slate called the Committee for Barrio Betterment. And their slogan was, "Give government back to the people." Back then, as y'all remember, they didn't have single-member districts, so very few women and people of color ever got elected. All of that slate of the Committee for Barrio Betterment lost in April of 1971. But on election night, one of the local reporters asked her how she felt. She felt that she felt good about what they had done and that they'd be back. Well, Mom, I think we're back. You know, so many journeys for me and for my family have started right here. And today we begin another one. In this journey, I am so lucky to have an incredible partner in my wife, Erica. And a wonderful inspiration in our daughter, whom many of y'all know, Karina. And in our little one, Christian. So I want to thank each and every one of you as well for being here today and joining us. What a great crowd we got out here. I also want to take a moment to say thank you to the press who are here You know, there was a time when Joaquin and I thought we were going to go into journalism. And so I know that the press work hard and that they are the friend of the truth in this country. Thank you very much for being here. So this is a special place for all of us, this west side of San Antonio. This is the place where my grandmother Victoria came in 1922 when she immigrated from Mexico as a 7-year-old orphan. It's where she grew up, where she worked hard for years as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter while raising my mom as a single parent. It's where my mother became an activist, working to improve the quality of life for her own community. It's where my brother, Joaquin, and I were raised by my mom, where we went to school. We were baptized just over there at the Guadalupe Church. We got a great public school education just a few blocks away, and I had the honor of serving these neighborhoods as mayor of San Antonio for 5 years. Yeah, this morning, I rode the number 68 bus with my brother down Guadalupe Street, like we did so many times when we were kids. Only this time, I brought my daughter Karina with me. That was the same route that we used to take with my mother to get to school or to go to her work during the summer. I want you all to look around this neighborhood. There are no front runners that are born here, but I've always believed that with big dreams and hard work, anything is possible in this country. This community is a community like so many others across the nation. A community of good people, of humble people. People who go to work early and stay late, oftentimes at more than one job, so they can provide for their family. When they go to bed at night, they say hopeful prayers. They want their children to do well. They want good health. They want the dignity that comes from a good job and the peace of mind that comes from being able to retire on their own terms. This is a community built by immigrants. Families from Mexico, but also families from Germany and from other countries. It's a community also built by Native Americans. Families who worked to build a future. Folks who came here to serve our country at Fort Sam Houston and Lackland and Randolph Air Force Base. And today, this community represents America's future. Diverse, fast-growing, optimistic, a place where people of different backgrounds have come together to create something truly special. And I'm proud to call myself a son of San Antonio. You know, 6 years ago, I had the honor of standing before the Democratic National Convention. I said then that the American dream is not a sprint or even a marathon, but a relay. My story wouldn't be possible without the strong women who came before me and passed me the baton. Because of their hard work, I have the opportunity to stand in front of you today. My family story wouldn't be possible without a country that challenged itself to live up to the promise of America. That was the point of the American dream. It wasn't supposed to be just a dream. America was a place where dreams could become real. But the thing is that right now, the relay isn't working. Today, we're falling backwards instead of moving forward. And the opportunities that made America the America that we love, those opportunities are reaching fewer and fewer people. Today, we're at risk of dropping that baton. And that's why we're all here this morning. because we're going to make sure that the promise of America is available to everyone in this 21st century. You see, I learned from my mother so many years ago in this community that when we want change, we don't wait for change, we work for it. When my grandmother got here almost 100 years ago, I'm sure that she never could have imagined that just 2 generations later, one of her grandsons would be serving as a member of the United States Congress, and the other would be standing with you here today to say these words: I am a candidate for President of the United States of America. Thank you. Cuando mi abuela llegó aquí hace ya casi 100 años, estoy seguro que nunca se imaginó que solo 2 generaciones después, uno de sus nietos formaría parte del Congreso de los Estados Unidos y que el otro estaría ante ustedes hoy diciendo las siguientes palabras: yo soy candidato para presidente de los Estados Unidos. I'm running for president because it's time for new leadership, because it's time for new energy, and it's time for a new commitment to make sure that the opportunities that I've had are available to every American. In the years to come, we must go forward as one nation, working toward one destiny, and that destiny is to be the smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth.
Well, there you have it. Julian Castro, the former San Antonio mayor and Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Obama administration, he is officially running for president in 2020. He'll be one of the youngest candidates in the Democratic presidential field, and likely its only Latino. You heard him speak in Spanish and English during his announcement, and he made a few digs at Republicans and the current occupant of the White House, President Trump. But he also, Leland, made a nod to his Democratic primary challengers that he's going to face in the very crowded field. He said, in this community where I'm from, no front runners are born here, but I always believe that anything is possible in this country. So he knows he's not a front runner. He's got an uphill to climb, but he's in the race, and he's in the race early.
Well, not a lot of people would have said Bill Clinton was a frontrunner in 1992 when the governor of Arkansas announced. He hearkened back to his DNC keynote speech that he made. That's the same speech that Barack Obama made in 2004, the same speech that Bill Clinton made in the 1990s. You got a preview, I think, of his stump speech when he said that the baton is being dropped in the relay of the American dream. What struck me, Kristen, and you alluded to this earlier, is he was on the short list to be the vice president for Hillary Clinton. She ended up going with Tim Kaine, in part because of how fluent he was in Spanish and his ability to connect with the Latino community. We saw him do that in his Spanish language address there for a few minutes earlier.
Yeah, and he also unveiled his campaign slogan, One Nation, One Destiny. And Leland, his first stop after making this announcement, I believe, is going to be to Puerto Rico. So a big announcement, big weekend for 2020 and Democrats making moves in this race. Well, coming up, lawmakers are at an impasse as the partial government shutdown enters a 4th week. We'll bring you the latest on this record-breaking funding lapse, and the California police